Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Attorney Andrew Branca Show. And this is also a law of self-defense show. We're simul-streaming to both communities today because this is a topic of interest to both. Of course, the Andrew Branca Show, where we focus on political and legal commentary, and the law of self-defense show, my law practice, where we focus on use of force law and Second Amendment rights. So generally, the content is different for those two audiences, but today we're talking about more wins, more Second Amendment wins for American citizens, and particularly, specifically for American citizens, and that's an important part of the narrative for today's show. So American citizens have secured two more huge Second Amendment wins at the hands of President Donald Trump's Department of Justice. Thank you, Donald. The first of these wins involves the news that broke just yesterday afternoon that the Trump department just want to make sure I'm catching the comments that the Trump department is dropping all efforts in its litigation against arm braces for firearms. And for those of you who don't know, I'll illustrate. I have some photos and stuff, videos of what arm braces are for firearms. The Biden administration had sought to classify pistols equipped with arm braces as short-barreled rifles, which may sound like a weird phrase, but it's a technical Second Amendment gun phrase that results in those firearms now classified as short-barrel rifles as magically being treated in the same restrictive manner as machine guns and destructive devices for purposes of federal registration, tax laws, and criminal prosecution, a decade or more in prison for magically converting what a moment ago was a perfectly lawful pistol into an unlawful, unregistered machine gun equivalent, a short-barreled rifle. So that's the first win, DOJ dropping that litigation on the merits. The second of these Second Amendment wins for American citizens relates to a federal court in the Fifth Circuit distinguishing between the class of persons who qualify for Second Amendment protections, noting that the Second Amendment applies to the people with an uppercase P, meaning American citizens and maybe permanent legal residents who've been accepted as permanent residents by the U.S. government, but not merely to people with a lowercase p, meaning even those who are illegally present in the U.S., the 100 million illegal migrant third world invaders currently infesting our nation. Now, both of these cases are very important. I'll cover both. I like the second one in particular, though, because it highlights the distinction between people, capital P, and people, lowercase p. These are not the same things. They're both may be physically present in the U.S., but they're not the same political classes of individuals. And that's going to have important implications in the upcoming litigation around so-called birthright citizenship and much else. Remember, the Democrats are trying to replace American citizens with hundreds of millions of illegal migrant third world invaders. They wish to change the glory that is America into the third world. And if we fail to distinguish between America and American citizens and the third world and third world invaders, we've lost the war before it even starts. But of course, we're not going to do that. And this is a decision that helps us along the way. As far as this show is concerned, the Andrew Branca Show, distinguishing these two classes of persons, capital P, American citizens, from people, lowercase p, is essential to America's national survival. America, folks, is for Americans. It is not for all 8 billion people on the planet. Go fix your own countries. This one's not yours. I am, of course, am attorney Andrew Branca, 34-year attorney, member of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar. My mission here is to deliver to all of you political and legal analysis that is exuberantly pro-American, as envisioned by our founders, pro-constitutional order, pro-Western civilization, pro-meritocracy, By the way, the Western part of Western civilization makes all the difference. And by pro-meritocracy, I mean no DEI here. Pro-family, adamantly opposed to everyone and everything barbaric and degenerate that undermines those American values. Whether you know it or not, America is currently in an existential war for survival of a desperation we haven't seen since the revolution itself. The good news is we're going to win, especially with President Donald Trump at the helm of our great nation and MAGA rapidly displacing the Rhino GOP party of the United States with one that actually loves America more than it loves money. And we have to win, because a failure to win would be a destruction of a nation, the loss of America that would cast us, our posterity, the whole world into a dark ages for centuries to come. But I'm not worried about it. We're kicking ass right now, and we will continue to. And this is more of all the winning. A couple housekeeping things. I did set up, as usual, a super chat goal for today. We already have two. A goal of 15 $5 super chats, as has become our practice. If we hit the goal of 15 $5 super chats, I will do bonus content on the show. There's other things I can talk about beyond this particular topic. I'll pull those things up and extend the show to talk about them as well. What kind of stuff do I have in mind? I had a bunch. I didn't really prepare anything. I have a very funny arrest of a supporter of illegal migrant third world invaders. He decided to deflate a bunch of ICE vehicle tires and got taken down pretty hard in a Home Depot parking lot, adjacent, of course, to a Jack in the Box. There's a little bit of news on the Epstein kerfuffle. More stuff to be released. There's the Wall Street Journal. Trump is about to sue the Wall Street Journal for this ridiculous letter that they've released that's supposed to have been written by Trump. It sounds like something out of the Twilight romantic novels, vampire novels written for women. It doesn't sound at all like Trump. And Trump's going to win another lawsuit against the mainstream media. And there's a bunch more that we can talk about. Boasberg, Judge Boasberg, the unelected black robe tyrannical inferior district trial court Judge Boasberg. Records of him speaking at a judicial conference, speaking negatively about Trump while Trump was a party in his court. That's not allowed. Although maybe that should be an entire show all by itself. But that's the kind of bonus stuff we'll talk about if we hit 15 $5 or better super chats. We're at 3 right now. That's not bad. Less than 10 minutes into the show. The other thing I want to mention is many of you, of course, follow me for the Andrew Branca Show, the political and legal analysis. But the other half of my life, work-wise, is my law practice, law of self-defense, where we teach people how to be hard to convict if they're ever compelled to use force in defense of themselves, their family, their property. We both teach people how to be hard to convict, and we help them to be hard to convict in court. And one of the ways we do that is we periodically run a free webinar, 100% free webinar, where we teach you in that webinar how to be hard to convict. And we have one coming up in a little bit under a month. Saturday, August 16th, we're doing one of our Hard to Convict webinars. Doesn't cost a penny. We're not living in a less violent world, folks, not with 100 million illegal migrant third world invaders committing crimes in our nation. Learn how to defend yourself effectively, efficiently, decisively, and be hard to convict. And you can join me. This is a live webinar. You can join me and a lot of other like-minded people at lawofselfdefense.com/hard to convict. So it's free, but you do have to register because webinar seats are limited. Again, that's lawofselfdefense.com/hard to convict. So I would encourage you to join us there. Now, I'm going to talk now about, let's see, where's that court decision? Hold on a second. I've got it here. Let's talk about the arm braces. It's really short. Okay, that's not the short one. Hold on a second. I do have it here. Man, this is a long docket. This arm brace thing has been going on for a long time. Okay, I got it here. I've got it. And then we'll talk about the Second Amendment for American citizens. Okay, so this is the arm brace issue first. Breaking news from yesterday. Oh no, it's a couple days ago. No, that's not what I wanted. That's not the right one. Hold on. This is the one I want. So many documents. All right. I found it. Make sure I've got the right document. And I do. But before we get to that, let me hit the wow. We already hit 4 of 15. We already hit 4 of 15 super chats. Electric Iron Man, $5. Finally able to catch you live. Let's go. Thank you, man. I love it. I love how excited this audience is about these shows. This is such a great community. But don't tell me I'm awesome. I already know. You got to tell your friends and family. Our mission is to grow this community. But thank you so much for that support. David Guido. Oh, good thing you're missing an R, huh? Thank you, David, for the support. I really appreciate it. $5 there. Not even a question to ask. Kat Kipling, addicted to this show. Positive, inspiring, intelligent, and hilarious. I got to save that one. I'm going to save that comment. Maybe I'll use that in promotional materials. Thank you. And she paid $5 to tell me that. That's so nice. Content of character, $20, says, want to see the arrest footage. I actually have 3 separate angles of the arrest footage of the illegal migrant third world invader advocate who was caught flattening ice tires. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. But we got to hit the goal of 15 $5 super chats. I know you just super chatted $20. I really appreciate it. And I encourage everyone to do that. Feel free to make every super chat $20. I am looking for broad support from the base. 5 of 15. This is 5 of 15. We're already a third of the way there. We're not even 15 minutes into the show. Whoops. TGR Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider was a great book by Neil Peart, drummer for the band Rush, the Canadian band Rush, but they were still good, even though they were Canadian. And a fantastic motorcycle rider. Ghost Rider is a great book about a time in Neil's life who we just lost recently. A time in Neil Peart's life when he was going through terrible hardships. And one of the ways he mitigated the trauma he was going through, and it's awful, I won't even describe it here, was to get on his motorcycle and start riding. And many of us who ride motorcycles, especially long distance riding, we get that. I know for me, riding my motorcycle is my psychotherapy. Anyway, I'm sure that's got nothing to do with this comment. Just the name Ghost Rider reminded me of the book. The USA is for Americans, not third world invaders. We must fight to preserve our constitutional republic. Great to see the 2A get more wins, and it's essential to doing so. Great show as always. Well, we haven't even started yet, but thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, Rip Neil Peart. Interesting guy. All right, so what do we have here? Whoops. This is what I want. Now, this is a very short document. It's only a couple paragraphs, but its import is tremendous. Import is tremendous. Stipulation of dismissal. So this is the case of MOAH versus MOAH v. United States. This is in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. MOAH v. Pam Bondi. Pursuant to federal rules of appellate procedure, the parties, the Department of Justice and the parties suing here against the ATF rule about arm braces, hereby stipulate to the dismissal of this appeal. And then they say with all parties bearing their own costs, but also they say the plaintiffs, the people suing against the Biden arm brace rule, retain the right to seek attorney's fees in district court, including attorney's fees incurred on appeal. So very short. That's all there is to it. Now, this recovering of attorney's fees is really important because a lot of these organizations fighting for our Second Amendment rights, organizations like the Firearms Policy Coalition, which is a leader in fighting actual litigation, not like the NRA that just pretends to fight for the Second Amendment. And I say that as a life member, benefactor member of the NRA. I have been my entire adult life. But the NRA is not really in the trenches fighting for our Second Amendment rights. They're just not. The Firearms Policy Coalition is one of those that is. The Second Amendment Foundation, where I'm also a life member, is one of those that is. I'm a big fan of the Firearms Policy Coalition. In fact, you may recall, if you've been following my content for a while, a couple of years ago, I saved an indigent client of the Colorado Public Defender's Office from a murder conviction in a self-defense case. And then I gave a talk at their annual meeting that they disliked so much. They designated me persona non grata, told me they would never work with me again, and ordered me to return to them the T-shirt, which was my only compensation for speaking at their annual conference. And instead, I auctioned the T-shirt off, raised $1,700, and sent that money to the Firearms Policy Coalition. That's how much I think of those guys. So what is this whole arm brace rule all about? Well, at its base, it's important to understand how ridiculous gun laws are. I mean, really, all gun laws ought to be just simply declared facially unconstitutional. The Second Amendment says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, strictly speaking, there were some restrictions on gun ownership in 1791 when the Second Amendment was ratified as part. Well, let's see. The Constitution was 1791. When was the Bill of Rights? Same time? I think it was after, right? 1791. December 15th, 1791. There were some restrictions. For example, it was unlawful to carry weapons for unlawful purposes. I mean, that makes obvious sense. There were laws against carrying weapons at polling places on election day. Some places had laws against that. There were laws against how much gunpowder you could keep in one place. That's not really a gun control law. That's a fire hazard law. But there were a few such legal restrictions. And properly understood, the Second Amendment today would still allow for those restrictions. So I think if someone were to, if there were to be a law today that said, hey, you can normally carry a gun for personal protection, but you can't carry it at the polling booth on election day while for the brief period you're present, I think that that kind of restriction on Second Amendment would be found to be constitutional because it's one the founding fathers would have accepted. But it's about the only one they would have accepted. Every modern gun control law, including licensing for concealed carry, including restrictions on magazine capacity, including restrictions on what kind of guns you can own, none of that was contemplated by the founding fathers. All of those are facially unconstitutional. The founding fathers, by the way, the U.S. Constitution allows for private ownership of warships, which to be a warship doesn't mean just the ship. It means an armed ship. And they were armed with cannons. Owning cannons was lawful at the time of the founding. That's what the founders would have considered those arms. So really, all modern gun control laws are facially unconstitutional. And nevertheless, from time to time, America, usually when it's under the control of Democrats, has ridiculously passed various gun control laws that obviously, inherently, are pointless because criminals don't obey gun control laws. It doesn't matter what gun control laws you pass, they don't obey them. Look at something like background checks, which if you did a poll, I imagine the vast majority of Americans would say, oh yeah, background checks, they're a good idea, right? We don't want bad guys getting guns. Bad guys don't do background checks. When I worked as a diesel mechanic in Harlem, New York, just about every week, we would have a car pull into our yard, pop the trunk, and in the back of that trunk was all kinds of stuff you could buy. There were car stereos, speakers, there was all kinds of crap in there. And guns. And a lot of the guys I worked with were pretty shady. And that's how they bought their guns. A lot of them had felony convictions. That's how they bought their guns. They didn't walk into a gun store and do a background check. Of course, they could never have passed a background check. But they were people who hung out with other dangerous people, and they needed guns for personal protection, in their opinion, and that's how they bought them, out of the trunk of a car. Today, people with felony convictions, they routinely buy guns by simply sending their newest girlfriend into a gun store to buy the gun on their behalf. The girlfriend doesn't have a felony conviction. Of course, it's a straw purchase. It's not allowed. You're not allowed to buy a gun that you're really intending to give to someone who can't legally possess guns. But that doesn't stop them from doing it any more than it stops them from committing armed robberies with guns against the law, murders with guns against the law, burglaries with guns against the law. Criminals don't obey gun laws. So gun laws are simply pointless. The only people who obey them are the law-abiding who don't commit crimes with guns. In fact, people who go to the effort of getting concealed carry licenses, meaning by definition law-abiding people because the background check is part of that process, have a lower crime rate than police. Police commit crimes at a higher rate than people who make the effort to go out and get concealed carry licenses. So what's the point of all this? It's all pointless. But one of these inane rules that's made is around braces. Now, here's a little press release yesterday from the Firearms Policy Coalition. No, that's the other case I want to talk about. Let's see this one here. Well, this is an old post, but let me pull it up anyway, because this arm brace litigation has been going on for a couple of years now, more than 2 years. It started in early 2023. When Biden's ATF issued these arm brace rules. And the Firearms Policy Coalition has been fighting these ever since. Ever since. Let's see. Here's one with a little video that might be fun to watch. Let's take a look at this. This is from May 2023, so it's a couple years old. Securing the injunction pending appeal against the ATF's pistol brace rule is a huge win because now we know we can end the rule, plain and simple. And this is, again, May 2023. Let's see if there's a video here I can play for you for entertainment purposes. And again, this is a post by the Firearms Policy Coalition, which I wholeheartedly support.
You must have wounded it. Its blood was on the leaves.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
If it bleeds, we can kill it. So let me do this. Let me provide a little more background on how we got here. You know what? Before I do that, let me explain what an arm brace is. Maybe not everybody knows what an arm brace is. So this is an arm brace. The part I put in the red square here, and this is an AR pattern rifle. So the most commonly owned pattern rifle in America. If you don't own one of these, folks, you're doing it wrong. Every American citizen should own at least one functional, working AR rifle, also a pistol. That's kind of basic requirements for being a practical American citizen. And normally these come with a shoulder stock that you would put against your shoulder as you would normally fire a rifle. And the shoulder stocks are often adjustable, so they can be adjusted to make the overall length of the rifle shorter or longer to fit different people. My young daughters need a rifle that's of a shorter overall length than I would use, for example. An adjustable stock is useful for this. By the way, one of the characteristics that was banned during the Clinton assault weapons ban, and is still banned in many states that have adopted their own assault weapons ban. When I lived in Massachusetts, for example, and I bought an AR, it came with what looked like an adjustable stock, but it was actually pinned in place. And if I had removed the pin so it could be adjustable, I would have been committing a felony under Massachusetts law. So you have shoulder stocks that are often adjustable. And then they came out with these arm braces that would be put on in place of the shoulder stock. And the idea for this was, and this is around the time when we had a lot of military veterans coming back from combat that had suffered horrific injuries, often disabling injuries, where one of their arms might have been disabled or completely lost. So it's very difficult to use a rifle in the normal manner with one hand. So somebody invented these arm braces. You take the shoulder stock off, you put the arm brace on, you can wrap the arm brace around your arm. It effectively braces the gun. Another artifact of this is if the firearm does not have a shoulder stock and it has a short enough barrel, it's technically a pistol, not a rifle. And you can buy it as a pistol, and it's regulated as a pistol. But if you take that firearm with no buttstock and a short barrel, that's a pistol because it doesn't have a buttstock, and then you add a buttstock, it becomes classified as a short-barreled rifle, which is a problem because short-barreled rifles are in the same bucket and short-barreled shotguns and suppressors and destructive devices. They're all in the same bucket as machine guns under federal gun law. So to possess it, you have to pay a $200 tax. You have to undergo various separate registration with the federal government. There's rules about moving them across state lines. It's all very complicated. It could take a year for the tax stamp or more to come back. You may need the approval of a local law enforcement officer, your local police chief, to sign off on the paperwork, none of which you have to do for a pistol, but you do have to do for a short-barreled rifle. And if you don't do those things and you're caught with a unregistered, untaxed short-barreled rifle, it's a federal felony. You go to prison for 10 years. Well, the distinction between these things can be rather subtle. So here's an example. At the top here, we have a shoulder stock, happens to be an adjustable shoulder stock. You have the actual firearm, and then you have a barrel. If the barrel's 16 inches or longer, this is all a rifle. That's how the ATF classifies it. But what if the barrel is shorter than 16 inches? Well, then the same firearm becomes a short-barreled rifle, subject to all the registration and taxes and criminal federal penitentiary liability that I just talked about. But what if you have all of that with the short barrel and you take the stock off and you put a stabilizing brace or an arm brace on it? Well, then it's a pistol, perfectly lawful to own. So these really very cosmetic changes change from something lawful with a 16-inch barrel to something unlawful without registration and taxes if it has a short barrel under 16 inches to something that's lawful again because you put a stabilizing brace under it. Are these weapons capable of doing different things? They're all firing the same cartridge. They're all really the same gun. And these are technical traps for gun owners that all should be found facially unconstitutional. Again, the Second Amendment doesn't say the right to keep and bear arms of a certain length shall not be infringed. The right to keep and bear arms of particular kinds of shoulder stocks or arm braces shall not be infringed. It simply says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So, of course, there are practical reasons why the owner of a rifle or a pistol, a firearm, may want that firearm to be more compact rather than less compact. You may want to carry it in a backpack. You may want to carry it in a suitcase. You may want to carry it in a vehicle of constrained space. You may want to be able to store it in a smaller location than a full-length rifle would be able to fit into. Lots of reasons, lots of practical, perfectly lawful reasons why you might want a firearm with the capabilities of a rifle, but in a smaller, compact package. And a lot of law-abiding American citizens were purchasing AR pistols, perfectly lawful, the AR platform with a short barrel, and then putting stabilizing braces on them, which was lawful to do. And that gave them a very compact AR platform firearm. And then Biden's ATF says, we don't like that because we think it has the functionality of a short-barreled rifle and therefore should be registered and taxed and carry all the criminal federal penitentiary liability of a short-barreled rifle. And how they applied this rule varied over time. So sometimes they would say, hey, just putting on the stabilizing brace, that breaks federal law. You've now created a short-barreled rifle. You're a felon. You're looking at 10 years in a federal penitentiary. Other times they'd say, well, the brace is fine if you're using it as a brace for your arm. But if it happens to touch your shoulder, then suddenly you've become a felon looking at 10 years in a federal penitentiary. You can have it on your cheek, but if it touches your shoulder, suddenly you're a felon. Does any of this make any sense? Or is this all obviously intended as a federal felon trap for gun owners intending to be completely law-abiding? So that's the whole issue here that Firearms Policy Coalition was fighting way back in May 2023. Mark Smith, Second Amendment scholar, he does, you should check out his YouTube channel. He does great work on all this stuff. A big focus on Second Amendment stuff, but he covers other things as well. I'm a big fan of Mark's work, so you should definitely give him a follow on YouTube. And this was done in 2024. This was actually an interesting facet in the course of this litigation. It did at one point get up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and there was a dissent. And of course, the dissent was the usual cabal of three. Justice Sonia, the wise Latina DEI Sotomayor, Justice Elena, no, I've never been married, never had kids. Why do you ask? Kagan, and Justice Ketanji, I'm not a biologist. How do you know what a woman is? Jackson. And the dissent was written by Sotomayor. Sotomayor doesn't like the arm braces because she says, with the arm brace, within a matter of minutes, using several hundred rounds of ammunition, the Vegas shooter, we all remember that event, right? Killed 58 people and wounded over, or here she was talking about bump stocks, not arm braces, but the argument is the same. Killed 58 people, wounded over 500. He did so by affixing bump stocks to commonly available semi-automatic rifles, meaning AR-15 platform rifles. Well, by long existing Supreme Court precedents on Second Amendment law, the thing that's most protected by the Second Amendment is commonly available semi-automatic rifles. So if that's the AR-15, it gets the ultimate of protection. Here's a little video clip from Representative Byron Donalds of Florida talking about arm braces. Let's hear what he has to say on this. And this is from, again, 2 years ago, June 2023. Everybody was already recognizing this Biden arm brace rule was nonsense.
The question for the people in the gallery, the people watching C-SPAN across our country is, have you ever seen a pistol brace? It is mostly plastic and or carbon fiber. It wraps around your forearm and it has a little pole that sticks out to the midpoint of your hand. The purpose of said brace is for people who actually had an arm injury but still wanted to take advantage of their Second Amendment rights. And the ATF, more than a decade ago, allowed that brace to be sold in the United States. And now we have same ATF who's deciding unilaterally to go back and say that that brace now needs to be registered. And if you don't register it, you are a felon in the United States. If that is not a gross violation of separation of powers, I don't know what is.
On this.
Okay. Repeal. I guess they voted to repeal the stabilizing brace rule, but it's still been in litigation for years and years. Here's another video, a little bit about arm braces to illustrate this for those who may not be familiar with it.
This is an Uzi pistol. I think most of you would agree it's a handgun. Now, if I shoot it like this is an Uzi pistol. I think most of you would agree it's a handgun. Now, if I shoot it like this, or if I shoot it like this, or or touch it to my shoulder. Did I redesign that into a rifle? That'd be kind of a dumb argument to make. This is an Uzi Pro pistol. It's a handgun. This is a brace. The ATF says that this is a handgun. If I shoot it like this, or if I just happen to incidentally try to shoot it from the cheek, but it touches the shoulder and shoot it like this, did I just break a law or redesign the handgun to a rifle because it just happened to touch my shoulder? I'm interested in what you have to say.
I say no. I say no. So that's what's been in play with this arm brace rule. And that's why it's so nice to see that Donald Trump's Department of Justice under Pamela Bondi has decided to do this. Stipulate to a dismissal of this litigation. The Department of Justice is no longer fighting to protect, to defend the ATF arm brace rule. So all of you, so there had been an injunction against the rule in place, and that injunction is now effectively universal. So the rule is neutered. All of you who have AR platform rifles with a shoulder brace on it, with a short barrel, you have pistols now. No need to worry about that. Now, this is just a dismissal of the suit. So the injunction in place stays in place. Obviously, a future Democrat president could try passing a different ATF rule. Don't ever put the Democrats back in power, folks. We know what happens. Everything Democrats touch turns to shit. All of it. All right, so that's the first case I wanted to cover. Let me hit some of these super chats. We're at 9 of 15 super chats. 9 of 15. We need 6 more to get to the bonus content for today's show. Sel Brown, $20. Thank you. Very generous. Andrew, can you do a special show on the other constitution that the judges use against the Trump administration and which toilets in America I can get a copy from? I do a show like that almost every day. Almost every day. Every time I cover these lawfare opinions from these unelected black robe tyrannical inferior district trial court judges who just make up the law, make up jurisdiction, make up authority. Just simply maim legal principles in an effort to get to Trump. Ignore their own rules of civil procedure, rules created by Congress, and the Article 3 judicial branch, which of course is a creation of Congress. Every federal court other than the Supreme Court, the only federal court created by Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution is the Supreme Court. Every inferior, and that's technically what they're called, every inferior federal district trial court is a creation of Congress. Creation of Congress. There could be none. All the Constitution demands is the Supreme Court. And then whatever other courts Congress decides to create, or not. And Congress has created a lot of courts, a lot of federal district courts, immigration courts, tax courts, patent courts, all kinds of stuff. But it doesn't have to. That's all at Congress's discretion. Revco, $5 says, no one should hate the NRA. They're a perfect distraction. The left screams about the NRA while the Firearms Policy Coalition, NAGR, National Association, is it, for gun rights, gun owners of America, kick teeth in under the radar. There's a number, Second Amendment Foundation, SAF, I would also add there. There's a number of Second Amendment organizations that do God's work in defending our civil rights in court. Excellent attorneys. And they all this costs a lot of money, folks. It's very, very expensive, especially when the federal courts are in open rebellion against Supreme Court precedent, like McDonald, like Heller, Caetano, Bruin. These inferior federal district courts are in open rebellion against the Supreme Court on Second Amendment jurisprudence, and the Supreme Court is letting it stand. It's outrageous. These organizations bring more Supreme Court, more Second Amendment cases to the Supreme Court every year, appealing the feckless, unconstitutional rulings of these unelected, black-robed, inferior federal district trial court judges. And the Supreme Court just says, nah. And it's extremely frustrating for these lawyers in the trenches because they're arguing their hearts out. And they're right. They're right on the legal arguments. And then the Supreme Court just kind of waves its hand. They did that again. This last term, they just waved away a couple really important Second Amendment cases. And I think it was Kavanaugh who wrote in that decision to wade them away this year. He's like, hey, don't worry about it. We'll get to it next term or maybe the term after that, which is another 2 years that American citizens are being denied their fundamental, enumerated Second Amendment civil rights. It's terrible. I feel so bad for these lawyers fighting so hard for us. But yes, in fairness, the NRA is kind of a distraction. They have the biggest profile, of course, so it's the one the gun control organizations tend to focus on, but they're not the ones doing the hard work in the trenches. C.P. Scott, $20. Thank you, man. The true issue in the USA is parents do not take ownership of their children's education. We all fail to teach what the Constitution is. Can anyone say what percent of millennials know what the three branches of government are? I don't know if they know what they are. I have to say, I was rather astonished when earlier this year, when we kind of rebranded as the Andrew Branca Show, because I was doing so much political and legal commentary. I felt every day like I was giving a basic class in civics, talking about the branches of government and the separation of powers and what's a core and plenary power of each branch and what constitutes lawful or unlawful jurisdiction for a federal court. I just kind of assume people know this stuff, but they really don't. And it's not because they're bad people. It's because they weren't taught. Because, of course, our founders granted us a constitution that provides a functional society. And a functional America is a threat to people who want to compel us to bend the knee to the third world. So they have to undercut the Constitution. They have to gut it and skin it and wear its fur as a costume of constitutionality. And a great first step in doing that is to not teach it. So people don't even know what it is. No one's going to defend something they don't understand. It's terrible. It's, Rush Limbaugh, one of my great heroes, used to talk about children having brains of mush. And that's true. I often talk about how the left propagandizes and makes up false narratives and all this kind of stuff. And that's all true, too. But the reality is all children, their brains need to be conditioned into a worldview. They're all going to adopt a worldview. The only question is who's going to teach it to them. That's why being an American citizen is so unique. It's why America is such an exceptional country. The third world's not the same. You can't just bring a Haitian to America and magically our soil turns him into an American. He wasn't raised that way. His mind was not conditioned to things like natural law, property rights, civil rights. His culture just doesn't have those characteristics, those values. He doesn't bring them with him. He's never had them. And he doesn't magically absorb them when he gets here. He brings his culture and values with him. Import the third world and you become the third world. So we have to make an affirmative effort on our own part with our own children, American children of American citizens, to make sure they are conditioned to value American values. If we don't do that, someone else is going to condition the minds of our children. And if we send them to public school, it's likely to be enemies of America. And that's where we get all these wackos in colleges. All these danger hair people. All these people who are perfectly comfortable electing a communist as mayor of New York City. Wouldn't it be great if the state ran the grocery stores? Wouldn't it be great if the rents were all frozen? Why not just make everything free? Why not just give all the food away for free? All the housing away for free? I mean, these people, stupid may be too far stretched, but ignorant certainly is not. And they're ignorant deliberately. They're made and kept ignorant, and they're trained in values that allow them to be manipulated by the left. So someone is going to, quote unquote, brainwash our children because they start as a blank sheet of paper. Somebody is going to be writing on that sheet of paper. You want the left to be doing it? Or do you want American values to be inscribed on that paper? Be very careful who's conditioning the minds of your children, because they can make your children your enemies, the enemies of your nation. It's not that hard. I mean, they've been doing it for decades. We see the results now. Ryan Rutcher, $5 says, I've been watching since January. Thank you for the hard work and reliable information you provide for all of us. Andrew Branca for president, 2028. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I would have a lot of fun on the Supreme Court, though. That would be awesome. I would like that. I wouldn't mind a Stephen Miller job. Just being an advisor to the president, that sounds like a lot of fun. A talking head for the president? I mean, doing this, except for President Trump, or for President J.D. Vance, or for President Marco Rubio, that would be a blast. Alaskan Sauce, $5. Looks like the Wall Street Journal will be paying for another wing of the Trump Presidential Library. It's amazing how all these mainstream media people, they self-own. Right? Was it CBS who just had to settle with Trump for millions of dollars over a lawsuit? Remember when Trump sued the whore? What was her name? Crystal Daniels or something? He sued her. Now listen, no one holds up Trump as the the pristine example of personal behavior. He's just saving our nation. But he makes some questionable personal calls, especially in his romantic sexual life. And I guess he was involved with this whore. And it ended up being the first time in history that the whore had to pay the client. Only Stormy Daniels, that's what it was. Stormy Daniels. The whore had to pay the client. That's how good Trump is. The whore paid him. Oh my God. And now the Wall Street Journal is going to be next. They just can never learn. And Shane says, my fantastic moderator, Shane says, the E. Jean Carroll case going to SCOTUS here soon. Yeah, I mean, something has to be done about these cases, these kangaroo courts. The same with the supposed 34 felony convictions against Trump. This is all nonsense. These are all judicial legal persecutions. They make up charges. They change the law. Like a bill of attainder under the Constitution, they changed the law just to get Trump. They fabricate how the law is supposed to work. They put it in front of a hostile judge and a hostile jury where they feel they're convicting literally Hitler. They're emotionally deranged. And we allow people to get labeled with felony convictions. It's nonsense. We allow people to be labeled as sexual predators. It's obviously nonsense. So hopefully the Supreme Court will put a check in. But our system of government is not designed to function well with deranged people making important decisions, being judges, being federal jurors, being prosecutors. If the system is manned by deranged, Trump derangement syndrome inflicted people, you're going to get these kind of crazy results. But nobody believes Carol was sexually assaulted by Trump. And Trump's response to that was so funny. Remember when it first came up? She first made her claims and they asked Trump about it. And Trump said, have you seen her? I mean, Trump is with supermodels. Have you seen her? That's his legal defense. And it works. It works. All right. So the second matter I wanted to discuss with all of you, the Second Amendment win. How are we doing for the goal? 10 of 15. We need 5 more $5 super chats to get to the bonus content, folks. Let me get to this other stuff. And this is a lengthier opinion. And again, this is the Firearms Policy Coalition. Let me pull this up. The Second Amendment win I wanted to share with all of you. It's not that one. It's this one. It's this one. Here we go. The Seventh Circuit today upheld the federal ban on illegal aliens possessing firearms, saying that a longstanding tradition exists of disarming individuals like illegal aliens who have not sworn allegiance to the sovereign. Now, I know a lot of you, especially in the Second Amendment community, we tend to take the view that the Second Amendment doesn't grant us a right. The right to keep and bear arms is inherent. It's a function of natural law. Natural law meaning law that's so fundamental, it applies in nature, right? Even wild animals defend themselves from attack. Even plants Plants develop toxins and other protective measures. Thorns to protect themselves from plants, right? That's how much defending yourself from predation is a function of natural law. Animals and plants do it. Certainly people do it. Humans have had a law of self-defense for as long as there have been humans. Conditions under which a use of violence upon another is not criminal, not sanctionable. Indeed, it's a social good. That's what the law of self-defense is all about. That's what the law of self-defense is all about. By the way, on that note, I'll just remind everybody, again, if you're watching this as the Andrew Branca Show, I'm very pleased you're here, but my law practice is actually law of self-defense. And we teach people how to be hard to convict if they're ever compelled to defend themselves, their family, or their property. And one of the ways we do that is through a free webinar we do periodically. We have one coming up in less than a month, August 16th, Saturday, August 16th. It's 100% free to learn how to be hard to convict, but you do need to register because there's a limited number of webinar seats. You can do that at lawofselfdefense.com/hard to convict. And if you've taken it before, feel free to mention in the comments what you thought of it. And if you liked it, especially if you liked it, recommend it to friends and family. In our experience, it's an overwhelmingly popular webinar. And again, it's free, but you do have to register at lawofselfdefense.com/hard to convict. So a lot of us in the Second Amendment community tend to think of the right to keep and bear arms as being an extension of the natural law right to defend ourselves and those we have a duty to protect from predation. And the Second Amendment simply affirms that already existing right and says the federal government cannot infringe it. Right? Even the Second Amendment itself does not say we grant the right to keep and bear arms. It says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I mean, baked into the Second Amendment is the premise that it already exists. The right to keep and bear arms, an already existing thing, shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed. But as a function of political authority, questions arise as to whether the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, protect the entire world equally, or whether they're intended to protect the people with a capital P, who are members of the body politic of America. You know, in the Declaration of Independence, it begins, we the people, with a capital P. That has import. People with a lowercase p and people as a proper noun with a capital P are two different things. We the people is the people who are part of this body politic, the United States of America. It's not the whole world. In fact, the whole point of the Declaration of Independence was to set ourselves apart, not just from the whole world, but even from the nation we were most affiliated with, Britain. We were setting ourselves aside even from our own cultural heritage. We, the people of the United States, people with a capital P. There's a distinction to be made between we, the people with a capital P, and the people of the world. Everybody else. We're not the same. We're not some homogeneous pool of humanity. We're different. We're better. Or the whole world wouldn't be fighting to be illegal migrant third world invaders into our nation. How many Americans are fighting to get into Ghana, to get into Mexico unlawfully, to get into Venezuela, to get into Haiti, to get into Djibouti, to get into Sudan? Why do all these nations, the peoples of these nations, fight, take terrible risks? Coming over the border from Mexico, women and children are, I don't want to get a strike from YouTube, but you understand what I'm saying. They're horrifically, repeatedly, systematically abused in the worst imaginable ways, all in their pursuit of their effort to illegally enter the United States. If we want America to stay America, it has to be for Americans. If we import the third world, we become the third world. We have to distinguish between the American people with a capital P and the rest of the other 8 billion people on the planet. Even if they manage to invade our nation, illegally cross our border, come here with our permission for limited purposes and stay beyond our consent, come here on work visas, student visas, tourist visas, and then stay beyond their consent. Come here and get a green card and then act contrary to the national interest of the United States. Come here and become a naturalized citizen and then act contrary to the national interest of the United States. All these people are not Americans. I would imagine, certainly even people born on our soil, but not to American citizen parents, are not American citizens. They're not. The 14th Amendment birthright clause does not grant the so-called birthright citizenship. That's nonsense. That's a lie we've all been told our whole lives. Me too. I believed it too, until I researched the actual law behind so-called birthright citizenship. It does not exist. Citizenship accrues to those who are born in the United States and subject to the complete and exclusive political jurisdiction thereof. No affiliation or bond to any other body politic. Native Americans born in American soil were not American citizens under the 14th Amendment if they had a bond to their tribe. Clearly, they've been being born on American soil for thousands of years before Europeans showed up. Still not American citizens because they had a political bond to their tribe. If someone's born on American soil to non-American citizens, their nationality is inherited from their parents. If their parents are Mexican, they're Mexican. Parents are Guatemalan, they're Guatemalan. Parents are Haitian, they're Haitian. Doesn't matter that they're born on American soil. That does not make them American citizens. So one of the reasons I like this decision, even though it kind of rubs counter to the fur, in the notion that we'd all American citizens often like to profess that, the right to keep and bear arms is simply a natural right. But in terms of what our American body politic recognizes as a body politic, we have to distinguish between the people with a capital P, American citizens, and the people with a lowercase p, the rest of the world. And that's what this decision does. And that's what I want to talk about. So let's see. I have it here. It's a little long, 22 pages, but I'll skip over the boring parts. I think it's that important to cover. Before I do that, though, we picked up a bunch more super. Did we hit 15? We're at 13 out of 15 for the super chat goal, folks. We need 2 more $5 super chats to hit the goal, and then I'll commit to covering additional topics. We do have 3 more super chats. Lisa from Long Island. The lovely Lisa from Long Island. How are you doing? I was just there, as Lisa knows, on the North Shore, soaking my toes in the Long Island Sound and watching the fireworks. It was great. I had 3 miles of beach all to myself. Beautiful beach. Just 30 miles outside of Manhattan. It's crazy. That's what the whole United States could be like, by the way. Once we get rid of 100 million illegal migrant third world invaders, the traffic will go away. The lines at the ER will go away. The overcrowded classrooms will go away. Housing, rent will become affordable again. In every dimension, our young men will have access to trades jobs again to build that character, those skill sets. Every facet of American life will become infinitely better once we deport 100 million illegal migrant third world invaders of our nation. Thanks for the support, Lisa. Lisa's always awesome. P. Scott, $10 says, another issue in the USA is the individual who believes in these values the Constitution set in law are continually told they are wrong by one bastardized branch or another of government. There's truth to that, and to a large extent, it's our own fault. Because you only have political power if you elect to office the people who will represent your views. The left is very good about this. The left is hardcore. They will forgive their politicians of any sin, even any sin, even the worst sins against children. They'll forgive their politicians of any sin, so long as that politician exercises political power consistent with the beliefs of the left, the progressive fascists. we on the right, we allow ourselves to get deflected by nonsense. And I know a lot of you feel very strongly about all this Epstein stuff, these Epstein files, whatever that is. Everybody's against children being abused, even young teenage women being abused by powerful, elite, rich men and them getting away with it. That's all bad. But that is not an existential threat against the United States of America. That's bad criminal conduct where people ought to be held accountable. But in contrast, with 100 million illegal migrant third world invaders in our nation, in contrast with the big beautiful bill, in contrast with inflation right now being effectively 0%, when just months ago it was over 9% under Biden, and inflation permanently bakes in increased prices. That 9% from Biden, it's still with us. Trump can reduce inflation to 0, but it doesn't eliminate the inflationary growth that occurred before. Biden's 9% plus inflation, we're going to pay that the rest of our lives. Our children will. Our grandchildren will. You would have to have deflation to neutralize the 9+% inflation that the Biden administration and whoever was pulling the strings of President Otto Penn Biden baked into our lives. All of American history, forever, moving forward. That's what happens when the Democrats are in charge. They let tens of millions of illegal migrant third world invaders cross our borders, infest our nation. Why? Simply so they can maintain and secure political power that the American body politic is not willing to give them. American citizens stop voting for Democrats. So they have to replace us. They have to replace us with the third world, a permanent underclass that will be reliably Democrat voters. Even if they don't vote, their mere presence in the U.S., if they can be concentrated in those blue cities and districts and states, are counted for apportionment of House seats. So the Democrats have 20 or 30 or 40 House seats today. They would not have, but for the 100 million illegal migrants in our nation. That's why they're allowed in. If the illegal migrants were not counted in the census for House apportionment, the Democrats would abandon them instantly. The only reason the Democrats are fighting so viciously to keep these illegal migrant third world invaders in our nation is because that's the last grasp of political power the Democrats have. If they lose 30 or 40 House seats, they're done forever. They will be in the political wilderness. They will have to disappear as a political power, political party, or completely reinvent themselves. But as the progressive fascist party, they'll be done forever. So we need to be extremely aggressive on the right about focusing on what really matters. And it doesn't mean don't talk about the Epstein files. It doesn't mean don't be upset about people who did wrong things. But you have to prioritize. When your house is on fire, the fact that someone's spray painting vandalism on your barbecue in the backyard, that's a bad thing. That shouldn't be happening. But your house is on fire. Put the fire out. That's the priority. Just one man's view. 11 Bravo Crunchy, $10. Why do people like you and Mark Smith never get nominated to the Supreme Court? You know why. All I have is an AAS and law enforcement, and I can read the Constitution better than the liberal justices. Such a disgrace. Yes, liberals, they read and write whatever will accomplish their political ends. The ends justifies the means, always. I read all these Second Amendment federal decisions that are in open rebellion against Heller and McDonald and Caetano and Bruin, and they're just word salad. They're just pretending to be legal reasoning. It's nonsense. Tabletop Joe. Oh, we did hit the goal. That's great. Tabletop Joe, $5 says, take my money. Take my money. Hey, folks, that's how I buy the, I'm wearing an official Trump tie today. Can you see that? This is one of my official Trump ties. The other one is still on my luggage from my most recent trip. The solid red one is my favorite Trump tie, but it's I forgot to unpack it. Phil Beard. One more, peeps. Let's get her done. Thank you, man. Phil's a very generous supporter of this show. 11 Bravo Crunchy. Again, another $5. I'm on vacation at EAA Air Venture in Oshkosh, Wisconsin this week. Is this the air show, the big air show? Is that happening in Oshkosh right now? Hope you put some miles on the motorcycle. Mine needs new tires. I need to work less. I did take two. I didn't do much riding so far this summer, and summer's going away. I did take a couple 3-day trips that were great. I did buy an additional motorcycle that I'm still, we call it farkling, customizing for my tastes. So right now it's in pieces in my garage, the new motorcycle. I'm still wiring some stuff up, but yeah, I have to get back on the bike too. Every year I usually take a ride out to Southern California from Denver through the mountains to Utah, go through Southern Utah, maybe a little bit of Idaho, and then down to Las Vegas and visit with some friends, and then down to Southern California and visit with friends there, and then of course work my way back. And I'll probably do that later this year. I'll probably do that in September this year again. That's a great trip, man. That's a life-changing trip. If you haven't ridden a motorcycle through the Colorado Rocky Mountains in southern Utah, you have not ridden a motorcycle. CJ Frank says, thanks for the show. Also, I'm really liking the extended show format more than the extra show. Yeah, I think it works better. It's really hard for me to schedule a whole additional show, but it's not that hard for me to add bonus content at the end, which is what I'll do with this show too. Let's see. All right, let's pull up this decision at the United States Court of Appeals saying that the Second Amendment is for American citizens, the people with a capital P, and not for people with a lowercase p, especially not for illegal migrants. And wait till you hear what this guy was up to and what his defense was, why he was appealing to the Second Amendment. It is nutso. Let me pull this over here so I can still see the comments. And folks, even though we hit goal, please don't stop with the super chats. Please don't stop. This is how you incentivize me to do more and more and more for this community. All right, let me grab my red pen. How are we doing here? All right. United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, U.S. versus Heriberto Carballal Flores. Before we even start, can I ask a question? How many illegal migrant third world invaders named Heriberto Carballal Flores does America really need? In what way is it in America's national interest for us to have Heriberto Carballal Flores as an illegal migrant third world invader of our nation? As we'll see, all he did when he was here was commit crimes. What about the other million, 10 million, 100 million Heriberto Carballal Floreses in America as illegal migrant third world invaders? I want to give them all a trip. I want to give them a trip to the booty. To the booty. All right, decided July 16, 2025, so just a couple days ago. 3-judge panel, of course, Federal Court of Appeals panel. Chicago police arrested Heriberto Carballal Flores after he repeatedly fired his pistol in a city street. A grand jury indicted him for possessing a firearm as an illegal alien in violation of Section 922 of federal law. We, the Court of Appeals, must decide whether that federal law comports with the Second Amendment or whether it's a violation of the Second Amendment for the federal government to say it's unlawful for illegal alien third world migrants to possess guns in the U.S. Carballal Flores was born in Mexico, so why didn't he stay there? His mother brought him to the United States when he was 10 years old. Presumably, yes, he was. He claims now to have the status of a lawful permanent resident, but at all times relevant to this appeal, he was an illegal alien. On the night of June 1st, 2020, so it's been 5 years for this case to get to this point. During a summer of unrest across the country, these would be the riot, looting, and arson being committed by the progressive fascist left. You may remember only Black Lives Matters, all that protest, Antifa, remember those? Burning American cities to the ground, which of course have never recovered. A police observation camera captured video of Caballo Flores in Chicago's Little Village neighborhood shooting a pistol 7 times at a passing car. He later tried to shoot at another car, but his firearm jammed. Officers arrested him based on the footage. Caballo Flores justifies the shooting, explaining that he was protecting his community from a perceived threat. He claims to have merely fired warning shots towards individuals he believed looted a neighborhood store. In the government's view, he took to the streets amid the civil unrest and without provocation indiscriminately fired at passing cars. Either way, he does not dispute that he possessed a firearm that night. At the time, he was unlawfully present in the U.S. A grand jury thus indicted him for violating 18 U.S.C. 922, which forbids an alien, an illegal migrant third world invader who is illegally or unlawfully in the United States from possessing a firearm. He moved to dismiss the indictment, claiming or challenging the constitutionality on the Second Amendment grounds. The district court denied that argument. The Supreme Court then issued Bruin in 2022, only 3 years ago. It's amazing. There, the court clarified the proper framework courts must apply when analyzing Second Amendment challenges. The test is rooted in the Second Amendment's test. This is the text and history test. Whether there was a history of similar restrictions at the time of the founding or during Reconstruction right after the Civil War, at which point the Second Amendment was applied to the states. Until that time, it was only applicable to the federal government. This court, meaning that this Court of Appeals in the Seventh Circuit, then decided Atkinson v. Garland. Garland at the time, of course, was the Attorney General of the United States. In that case, we offered district courts and parties guidance on how to analyze these 922 cases, which bar felons from possessing firearms. Caballo Flores, seeing an opportunity, his lawyer seeing it, moved to dismiss the indictment once more on this new case law and cited Atkinson for support. He urged the district court to hold Section 922 unconstitutional both on its face and as applied to him. So this whole issue around felons possessing guns, there's a federal law that says if you're a convicted felon, you can't possess a gun. But there's been challenges to that provision because the challenge is, well, was there a similar restriction on gun ownership during the founding? And what the federal courts have been finding is that, well, at the founding, there were restrictions about violent people, unlawfully violent people having arms. And so someone who's convicted of a violent felony, well, that restriction may be constitutional. But there's a lot of felonies in the modern era that are not involving violence. You write a bad check over a certain dollar amount, you may well have committed a felony. You steal a car, you may well have committed a felony. But have you committed an act of violence? Not unless it was a carjacking. And the courts have been saying, well, you know, some of these people who've been convicted of non-violent felonies have never been convicted of an act of violence. This federal restriction on guns for felons as applied to them is unconstitutional. It's not generally unconstitutional, but as applied to non-violent felons, it's unconstitutional. So Caballo Flores decides this is fertile ground for him to appeal his own conviction for being an illegal alien in possession of a gun. He's going to challenge it both generally, the whole restriction should be unconstitutional under the Second Amendment, and as applied to him in his particular circumstances. The district court, meaning the trial court, declined his request to find the statute against illegals having guns unconstitutional. Applying Bruin's text and history framework, it concluded that the plain text of the Second Amendment presumptively secures for illegal aliens the right to possess firearms, but it held that the government rebutted the presumption by identifying a historical tradition of disarming untrustworthy adherents to the law, scofflaws, including British loyalists at the time of the founding. To the court, that tradition justified disarming illegal aliens today. So legal aliens might well have a Second Amendment right, but not illegal aliens, because there was a founding era tradition of disarming untrustworthy adherents to the law. Although the trial court rejected Carballo Flores' facial challenge, it found merit in his as-applied challenge, as applied to him in particular. Laws disarming British loyalists did not apply to those willing to pledge their loyalty to the American government. Once an individual disclaimed his loyalty to the British government, he was no longer considered dangerous or untrustworthy, and therefore could possess a firearm. From this historical exemption, the trial court reasoned that Congress may disarm only untrustworthy or dangerous illegal aliens. It concluded, the trial court did somehow, that Carballo Flores is a trustworthy adherent to the law, despite being an illegal alien, because, among other things, he is employed. Aren't we all supposed to be employed as adults? And has no felony convictions. Well, until this one. So as applied to him, the trial court decided Section 922 violated the Second Amendment. The government appeals. And the government can appeal because this is not an acquittal by a jury. This is a dispute over a matter of law. And that can be appealed even by the state. The government appeals. The Second Amendment secures the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Would have been helpful if they capitalized that, right? But of course, this is the whole Bill of Rights is in the context of political rights. The Supreme Court held in Heller that the right belongs to individuals. The Supreme Court has since confirmed that people's freedom to carry arms is not a second-class right. That's McDonald. It ranks instead among the most fundamental rights necessary to our system of ordered liberty. That's Rahimi. These are all seminal Second Amendment cases of our generation, at least my generation. The protections contained in the Second Amendment have their limits, though. And that's true. No constitutional right is unlimited. That, again, is from Heller, the first of these seminal Second Amendment cases. The government maintains some latitude to regulate who may possess firearms, what firearms they may possess, and where they may possess them. But like the constitutional right itself, the government's power to regulate also has limits. The Supreme Court in Bruin set out the now familiar test for evaluating whether a firearm restriction exceeds those limits. To begin, a court must interpret the Second Amendment's plain text. When the text covers an individual and his conduct, the Constitution presumptively offers protection, and then the burden shifts under Bruin. The burden shifts to the state to prove why that presumption has been rebutted. Continuing with the decision, the government may rebut that presumption by persuading the court that the regulatory burden is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearms regulation. This requires reasoning by analogy, which of course courts do all the time. A modern regulation with relevantly similar historical counterparts will survive the scrutiny. This does not demand identifying historical twins or dead ringers, an exact founding statute parallel to a modern statute. The government must only show that its modern regulation conforms to the principles that underpin that historical restriction. The courts rely on two metrics when assessing the strength of these analogies. We compare how the challenge regulation burdens the right to bear arms, and we consider whether the reasons, the why, is the same. So, for example, I mentioned earlier that there was a founding era law about how much gunpowder, a limit on how much gunpowder you could keep in your house. That wasn't considered a gun law. The why of that was not an arms limitation. The why was a fire hazard limitation. Nevertheless, that gunpowder law is cited by these rebellious, unelected, black-robed, tyrannical, inferior federal district trial courts who are anti-civil rights, anti-Second Amendment. They still cite that gunpowder limitation, which was a fire hazard limitation, as justification for limitations on magazine capacity today. Obvious nonsense. We begin with the Second Amendment's text. So that is the how and the why analysis. I'm sure this court will be circling back to that. We begin with the Second Amendment's test. Before I do that, let me take a look at the super chats because I see we have just one. Okay. 11 Bravo Crunchy, $5 says, do you think convicted felons should get their rights back when they complete their entire sentence without parole or early release? My answer is, yeah, I do think that. I mean, we have a problem in America because we release people from federal sentences too early. But if the sentence was adhered to, if the sentence was appropriate to the crime, especially violent crimes, and adhered to, I think someone who served their full sentence, or if they were sentenced and then paroled, their full parole, the full sanction, including any fines, everything. Once they've satisfied the full sanction for their criminal conduct, I think they should get all their rights back. Their right to vote, the right to keep and bear arms, everything. I think they've paid their price to society. And then if they violate the law again, they suffer the sanctions again. But that only applies where they've actually satisfied the sanctions. Again, we have in our we fallen victim, like we fell victim to this marijuana's harmless story. I include myself. I fell victim to that. We fell victim to the gay marriage is fine story, and I fell victim to that too. And we fell victim to the we have an over incarceration problem. We don't. In America, we have a massive under incarceration problem. But because we were conned into thinking we had an over incarceration problem, we start kicking people loose from prison. Violent people who, of course, go back out and commit crimes. And then we let violently deranged people live in our streets amongst our women and children. So those people obviously ought to be suffering criminal sanctions for their violent behavior. They should be kept in prison. But assuming people did their whole sanction, I mean, fundamentally what I think is either someone, if you don't, here's the reality. When you release a felon from prison into the public, if he wants a gun, he's going to get a gun. Remember, I told the story about how when I worked as a mechanic, the cars would just pull into the yard, pop the trunk. You bought a gun out of the trunk. So there's nothing we can actually do to prevent felons from possessing guns if they want to. There's no way to stop it. It's impossible, especially in a nation with more guns than people like America. So given that you can't stop them anyway, the rationale should be, listen, either we trust this guy to have guns and we're going to release him from prison because we know regardless of what the gun laws are, he can get a gun if he wants one, or we don't trust him to have guns and we're going to keep him in prison. By the way, little known fact, would you believe that there are shootings by prisoners in prison? They get guns in prison and they shoot each other. How do the guns get in there? Well, the same way that the drugs get in and all the contraband gets in from the guards is usually how it's smuggled in. But even in prison, prisoners get guns. So you're certainly not going to keep guns out of their hands if they want them out in public. So I would say either the guy's still dangerous, we don't want him in public with a gun, in which case you can't release him into public, or we believe he's served his sentence, he served his sanction to society, and he's not any longer dangerous. We're going to give him the benefit of the doubt since he's paid his price to society, and we're going to let him out. And then we should just let him have a gun. Let him have a gun. Arguably, many people who've previously been in, high crime cultures have, if anything, more of a need for a gun than normal law-abiding people, assuming, of course, they've reformed. All right, back to this. We begin with the Second Amendment's text. Nobody disputes that Carballo Flores's weapon, a .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol, is an arm. Well, that's why it malfunctioned. So I have many friends who work in law enforcement at the state and federal level, and there's a whole series of guns that's commonly used unlawfully in urban centers because they're very inexpensive. They're basically made out of pot metal. A lot of them are made in Florida. I forget the names of the companies now, but a lot of them are simple blowback design pistols. There's no complicated oh my God. There's no complicated mechanism for, chambering or unchambering the round. There's no locking mechanism in the gun. And because you don't need one, because they're so underpowered, because they're underpowered because they're 22 caliber, 25 caliber, 32 caliber guns. And you can design guns that are just blowback for those. And they're still a reasonable size. I mean, you can make really big, you can make blowback guns for large calibers too, but generally the slide needs so much mass that they're unwieldy at that point. But a lot of really cheap guns can be made in 22, 25, 32 caliber. And for those of you who think you have to have a 9mm for self-defense, listen, I carry a 9. I carried a 45 for 25 years. I like those larger calibers, but I can assure you, lots of people get killed with 22, 25, and 32 caliber pistols. Lots of them. Normally, they need to get shot a whole bunch, but they get killed by those calibers. But because the guns are so cheap, they very commonly are broken when they're seized by police. Very commonly, for example, they have a broken extractor on them. So they can't extract a cartridge. That might be what happened here. But anytime you see a gun malfunctioned, being used by a criminal, it's almost certainly one of these cheap pop metal guns in 22, 25, or 32 caliber. So there's no question that he had the weapon, a 25 caliber semi-automatic pistol, that it is an arm within the context of the Second Amendment. The parties argue about whether he's an illegal alien, whether he's among the people, and this should be a capital P, that the amendment protects. According to the government, he is not among the people because that term covers only American citizens. And this is the same legal rationale I want to see applied to the birthright citizenship cases, which is why I like this decision and why I'm sharing it with all of you. The Supreme Court has not squarely addressed this textual question, whether the Second Amendment applies to illegals or just to American citizens, but it stated in Heller that the phrase the people seems to have been a term of art employed in select parts of the Constitution to refer to a class of persons who are part of a national community, what I call the body politic, who have otherwise developed sufficient connection with this country to be considered part of that community. So in modern parlance, we tend to include in this group American citizens, of course, and also often permanent resident aliens, people who've made a permanent commitment to America and who we've accepted, America has accepted as a permanent resident. So it's a two-way street. You don't just get to come here illegally and stay for 25 years and say, well, I've made a permanent connection. No. It's a two-way street. We have to accept your presence. To be sure, the Supreme Court has cautioned that its textual exegesis was by no means conclusive. That was from a different decision about a Fourth Amendment case. Nevertheless, this Court of Appeals relied in part on another decision. They're all involving South American and Central American names. Why is that? That's because we are a nation infested with 100 million illegal migrant third world invaders, folks. Why don't they have Swedish names or German names? Why don't they have French names? Why do they all have third world names? We relied on part of that definition in another case to conclude that some illegal aliens are among the people presumptively entitled to Second Amendment protections. This Court of Appeals holding in that case positions us as an outlier among our fellow circuits. Some Court of Appeals have concluded that illegal aliens are categorically excluded from the people. And again, this should really be capital P. Still, other circuits have assumed without deciding that illegal aliens fall within the scope of the Second Amendment's protections. Our case predates Bruin and Rahimi, which are part of a sea change in Second Amendment jurisprudence. So their prior precedent, this Court of Appeals is saying our prior precedent was created before Bruin and Rahimi, so we have to look at Bruin and Rahimi to say if we need to change our precedent. But the Supreme Court in Bruin said nothing about who may lawfully possess a firearm. Bruin said nothing about who. And Rahimi all but passed over the threshold textual inquiry, perhaps because nobody really disputed that the Second Amendment presumptively covered the individual in that case. So no intervening Supreme Court precedent requires us to reassess here whether some illegal aliens are among the people. In any event, doing so would not alter the outcome here, even if the plain text of the Second Amendment presumptively protects Cabaya Flores because he falls within the people. A long tradition of disarming individuals like illegal aliens who have not sworn allegiance to the sovereign. We turn to that issue now. A long tradition exists of disarming individuals like illegal aliens who have not sworn allegiance to the sovereign. The strongest evidence that a modern federal law accords with the historical understanding of permissible firearm regulations comes from around the time of the Second Amendment's adoption. That said, the Second Amendment codified a pre-existing right to bear arms. So the English common law tradition informs our analysis. It's English law is not American law, but it's always informative because it's the underlying foundation of American law. Post-ratification history may also help illuminate the scope of the government's authority to regulate arms, particularly around the Civil War, as I talked about. In the English tradition, one's alien status carried with it a smaller basket of rights. Whoops. And that should apply to the American concept of citizenship too. Blackstone, who exerted considerable influence on the founders, distinguished between aliens and natural-born subjects. Natural-born subjects, as the label implies, were those born within the dominions of the Crown of England and thus had an allegiance to the sovereign as a consequence of birth. America, by the way, abandoned this citizenship from the soil concept when we became a nation. We abandoned it, by the way, for good reasons. We abandoned it because, I guess, to an illegal immigrant in 2025, this sounds like a good idea, right? Oh, I'm born on the soil, then therefore I'm a citizen of the sovereign, of the government, of the United States, here to England. But the England doctrine, it was a two-way street. So you didn't just get the benefits of English citizenship, you got all the burdens of English citizenship. Meaning, for example, you could be called to military service. You could be called to do all kinds of things. You were a subject of the crown, subject to the whims of the king. Our founders did not like that idea, right? They didn't like the idea of kings. So they abandoned this English notion of you're born on English soil, you get the benefits of English citizenship and also all the responsibilities to the king. Our founders said, no, we're not doing that. We're basing our concept of citizenship on an affirmative consent by both parties, more of a contractual relationship. An alien, on the other hand, was born outside the dominion of the crown. His status afforded him fewer rights than those enjoyed by natural-born citizens. Aliens' rights were accordingly circumscribed in important ways in English common law. Relevant here, land and gun ownership were historically linked. The right to own guns in 18th century England was statutorily restricted to the landed gentry, something else America opposed. This provides early evidence that concerns over an alien's lack of allegiance to the crown, which justified barring him from holding land, also warranted him barring him from keeping arms. By the way, illegals and foreign nationals, foreign governments, should also be prohibited from owning land in America. The Chinese government, absent embassies, which are present with the permission of the U.S. government for diplomatic purposes, the Chinese government ought not be legally entitled to purchase land in America. No foreign government should. That's a whole separate show in itself, but it came up, so I spoke to it. But an alien could overcome these impediments through naturalization. Fair enough. You become a citizen, you become one of the people with a capital people, you get the rights of the people. This disarmament of Catholics in England, which was, of course, a Protestant government, confirms that the English tradition linked the right to bear arms with one's allegiance to the sovereign. Catholics were perceived as resident enemy aliens because they owed allegiance to a foreign sovereign, the Pope. Just like we didn't recognize American Indians as American citizens because they had allegiance to their tribe. Section 2 here. Let me take a look at these super chats before I go on, though. P. Scott, $5 says, I don't think in this era we don't have a prison system that reforms the inmates to trust the violent criminals to have one. Fair, but I would suggest this. Many of these violent crimes they're being convicted of carry sentences of 20 years or more. And old guys don't tend to commit violent crimes. Violent crimes are overwhelmingly committed by young men between the ages of 15 and 25. And then they age out of the violence pool, often because they've been killed, of course. But even if they survive, they've been aged out. I think there's a fundamental principle where if someone has served their time, paid their debt to society. Now, listen, I think reasonable people can disagree on this, but I think there's a benefit to reintegrating into society people who've paid their price to society. I believe in redemption. Now, I think when we have people who commit violent crimes, they murder, rape, commit manslaughter, maim people, commit armed robberies, which are armed robbery with a gun is routinely good for 20 years in prison. But when we let them serve only 2 and release them, that's clearly not adequate. They're still in that high risk age range for violent crime, and the recidivism rate, which is through the roof, reflects this. So I guess what I would say is you have to be adult about this policy matter. You can't just say he murdered someone, we sentenced him to 1 year, and therefore he's served a sanction to society, and he should get all his rights back. I would not be in favor of that. Content of character. Very generous supporter of this show says, I take Andrew's seminar 2 times annually, always worthwhile. And he's talking, of course, about our Hard to Convict webinar, which I'll mention again at the end of the show. It's hard to pop up the image when I'm doing this red penning thing. But we teach you how to be hard to convict if you ever have to defend yourself, your family, your property. It's a free webinar, doesn't cost a penny. But you do have to register because there's a limited number of seats. And you can get your 100% free seat right there. I put it at the bottom. Hard to Convict, lawofselfdefense.com/hard to convict is where you register for that free webinar on how to be hard to convict, obviously enough. All right, let's get to the English tradition here, which I might skip over a bunch of this because we're not in England. The English tradition, where's my red pen? What happened to my red pen? Well, that's awkward. Let's see. Well, I'm looking for that. PR Barante, $5 says, as an RN, I work with many Africans. I've been yelled at. You're always talking about rights. Many African women lose their marbles too hard to adjust. Yeah, we have a real demographic problem in America. Not every culture, not every... It should be editable. I've been editing it. I'll figure it out. Not every demographic is suited to be an American. Not every demographic in the world over has the same IQ, for example. IQ varies across the globe rather substantially. From a low, in some African countries, like Somalia, the average IQ is about 45 or 50. In America, you're considered mentally retarded at about 70, 80. The average IQ is 100. I mean, even in America, not everyone should be voting. Our founders had quite restrictive franchise. They would have rolled in their... Oh, I got my pen back. They would have rolled in their graves if they knew that we allowed anyone who managed to live until the age of 18 to vote, no matter how unproductive, no matter how much of a drug addict. You know, we have limitations on who can have a gun. Like if you're addicted to drugs, that's one of the questions on the form. You have to fill out the 4473 when you buy a gun. And if you answer yes, you're not allowed to have the gun, but you can still vote. Why is that? All right, the English tradition, I got it back. It went away and then it came back. Continued through the colonial and founding eras. It was well understood that the right to keep and bear arms did not extend to all New World residents. Bans and other constraints on slaves and Native Americans were regrettably commonplace. All gun control laws are fundamentally racist, folks. They all have racist foundations. All American gun control laws. The colonists did not consider either group to be citizens. That's right. Native Americans, not citizens, that possessed rights commensurate with English subjects. Like aliens in England, slaves and Native Americans faced gun restrictions on the grounds of alienage or lack of allegiance to the English sovereign, just like an illegal migrant third world invader today. They have some examples here. Disarmament was not strictly tied to race. The colonies also prohibited white men who refused to swear an oath to the English sovereign from possessing firearms. It was all about allegiance to the sovereignty. In America, that, of course, would be our United States of America. Some colonies restricted Catholics' ability to keep arms. Concerns over one's loyalty to the crown and the polity, the nation, thus continued to drive firearms regulation. In time, the founders declared total independence from the crown. We remember that, don't we? At that point, the shift of allegiance was complete, and the newly minted states began adopting the embedded practice of conditioning the right to bear arms on one's loyalty to the sovereign. Now, each respective state. So, of course, the original sovereigns were the individual states. You were a citizen of your state, of Pennsylvania, of New York, of Maryland. And then we had a collection, the United States. But we have a federal form of government, which has since been terribly corrupted. But the idea was a federal form of government in which you had state sovereigns, and then you had a federal sovereign. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as one state sovereign, had a test act while the ink was still drying on the Declaration of Independence that disarmed any man over the age of 18 who would not swear allegiance to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We get the idea there. From the colonies to the early republic, governments consistently conditioned the ability to possess arms on loyalty to the sovereignty. And this should apply to all other rights as well, right? Not just Second Amendment rights. The difference between the people with a capital P, loyal to the sovereign, and the people with the lowercase p, who have a political bond elsewhere. This provides strong historical evidence that the founders would have considered such regulations compatible with the Second Amendment. Regulations limiting the rights of non-capital P people to possess arms. Post-ratification understandings and the scope of the right confirms the same. There's a lot of history here, but it confirms the same, so I'm not going to dwell on all of this. That brings us back to criminal law here, 18 U.S.C. 922, whether it conforms to our national regulatory tradition on arms. Congress decided to prohibit any alien who is illegally or unlawfully in the United States from possessing a firearm. We conclude that provision sits comfortably alongside the line of firearms regulations that came before it. We consider the two metrics courts use for assessing whether the challenge regulation is consistent with the principles. And we're back to the why and how. I knew we would come back to this. This is the test formulated in Bruin for constitutionality with the Second Amendment. We begin with why aliens have been precluded from possessing arms, then and now. The government has consistently conditioned the right to bear arms on one's allegiance to the sovereign, and it shows one's willingness to accede to the terms of social order in exchange for the full benefits of citizenship. Aliens, as a matter of their status, have not yet affirmed their allegiance to the sovereign. That has uniformly served as the basis for disarming them. It serves as the basis for Section 922's prohibition as well. And we compare also how the government has traditionally regulated firearms to how Congress has chosen to do so today. From the common law onward, aliens have historically been disarmed unless and until they swore an oath of allegiance to the sovereign. The way 922 operates maps onto that tradition. So the why and the how are both satisfied. Caballus-Flores argues that even as Section 122 is facially constitutional, as we have now concluded it is, the law still operates in an unconstitutional manner as applied to him. This is a technical term of art phrase, the as applied to challenge. Yes, it's generally constitutional, but it's unconstitutional as applied to my particular circumstances. In his view, our nation's regulatory tradition supports disarming only dangerous and untrustworthy aliens. And because, he says, he is neither, he should be able to possess a pistol, notwithstanding the general prohibition on aliens keeping arms. Recall that the trial court agreed with him and dismissed the indictment. After Bruin, our Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals has not yet decided whether a defendant can lodge an as-applied challenge to any section of 922. Several different circuits have upheld 922 on the ground that a long tradition exists of disarming groups deemed to be dangerous, but because not all felons are inherently dangerous, some courts have left open the possibility of allowing non-violent felons, this is exactly what we talked about earlier, to challenge the constitutionality of a restriction as applied to them, the as applied challenge. And here we have examples of someone who is a felon for food stamp fraud, not a violent crime, for example. Section 922 G5A does not present the same potential over-inclusion problem. Our nation's regulatory tradition supports disarming aliens who have not sworn an oath of allegiance to the sovereign. So this is distinguishable from the non-violent felon paradigm. We express no views on whether criminal defendants may lodge as-applied challenges, but district courts need not conduct individual assessments of illegal aliens in the same way they might do for a non-violent felon for purposes of disarmament. The trial court here accordingly made an error in holding the statute unconstitutional as applied to this illegal alien. So illegal aliens do not have an as-applied challenge privilege. The trial court's decision to dismiss the indictment is reversed, and the case is remanded back to the trial court for proceedings, continued prosecution. So again, the reason I really liked all this was because of how clearly it distinguishes the people with a capital P from the people with a lowercase p, in effect distinguishing, for broader purposes, American citizens and perhaps those who are permanent legal residents, green card holders, people America has accepted as non-transitory permanent residents of our nation, on the one hand, as one bucket of rights, and the people with a lowercase p, transitory, legal but transitory, work visa, student visa, tourist visa, always intended and expected to return home. Or, in particular, the most egregious class, of course, are the illegal migrant third world invaders, people who are not even lawfully present, not even transitorily, not lawfully present in the United States. I see we got a few more super chats. Let me take a look at this here. That one I addressed already. P. Barante again, $5. I came out of university not appreciating the USA. I didn't start to care about it until I realized that I was losing what I love so much by not caring. Yeah, I think that's true for many people. Because we're brainwashed. We're conditioned to believe that all humans the world over are essentially the same and share our values. And that's not true. I came across a couple of interesting posts on X that really I thought were telling in a very important way. And a couple of them were almost throwbacks to an America I remember, a high trust America, where the people share a common set of intrinsic values. And by high trust, I mean things like you've probably all been out in farmland, right? And you may come across a farm stand that has boxes or baskets or bushels of fruit or vegetables, peaches, tomatoes, corn, whatever it might be. And on the boxes, they have prices labeled, right? 5 years of corn, $5, whatever the case may be. But there's no person there. There's nobody running the stand. There's just a place for you to deposit your money. And they're trusting you to pay for what you take on the terms set forth on the price sheet. That's a high trust society. And that works in a society where people share the same values, unless, of course, someone's, a corruptly criminal. Those exist in all societies. But in a low trust society, an American society in which we're infested with 100 million third world illegal migrants, they bring their low trust values with them. They're the ones who litter. These same people, we can't have plastic straws because the third world throws trillions of metric tons of plastic into rivers and oceans. Of course, the rivers lead to the oceans. They just pollute. It's part of their culture. They just pollute. And when they come to America, those are the polluters in America. Americans have stopped throwing trash out their car windows decades ago. Ever since we had the fake Native American, right, with the tear running down his face when the fast food bag was thrown out of the car window by the highway, and the guy who was actually Italian but was dressed up to look like an American, a Native American, got the one trickling tear. We stopped polluting years ago, decades ago, now generations ago. But the third world brings their practices with them. And part of the practice, they're not part of our society and our cultural values. You can't trust them at a farm stand. One of the recent anecdotes I just saw was a guy was at a gun show. And it was a high-end gun show. So these were, a lot of gun shows are kind of trash. If you've been to them, you know what I'm talking about. But there are high-end gun shows where all the tables are covered with very valuable collectible guns, rare guns. They can be easily worth thousands of dollars each. And the person who posted said, I was at this gun show as just an attendee, and I was fascinated at how high trust it was. A guy running a table with many thousands of dollars worth of guns on the table would simply go outside to have a cigarette or use the restroom and just leave all his guns there. He was utterly confident that no one in attendance would simply steal his guns, steal his property. That's what a high trust society is like, folks. And we used to have a high trust society. America was much more a high trust society in 1980, even 1990, than it is today. I mean, I would routinely leave my bicycle as a kid unlocked. We would routinely leave our doors unlocked. You can't do that today. I mean, today you're almost compelled to use air conditioning because in many communities, if you just use screens and you leave your windows open, some dude's coming through that screen. In my own neighborhood, and I live in a pretty high-end neighborhood, people who park their cars in their driveways routinely have their cars burglarized. Drug addicts or whoever, I don't know who it is, they're caught on Ring cameras all the time. They're put on Nextdoor, the social community app. People just have stuff stolen out of their cars. If the cars are locked, the cars are broken into. It's a low trust society. If you leave something of value in your... So here's another example from my own personal experience. Many years ago, I may have shared this anecdote before, I'm not sure, but many years ago, as a young man, so this would have been like the early 1990s probably, I drove my car and my family into Little Italy in New York. And there's lots, at least at that time, there's lots of little parking lots. So like little tiny parking lot where you can put like 9 cars, but you can't park your own car. There's not like spaces. It's just an empty lot. And all the cars are just, the guy who runs the lot, who's collecting the money, he just squeezes every car into each other. So cars are blocking in other cars. It's just everything's squeezed in really tight. But that's fine. So I left the car with him and he parks it and I pay him and I go off and I'm about a block towards the restaurant we're going to. And I realized, oh my God, I left my camera on the front seat of the car. And of course, it's Manhattan. You leave something of value on the front seat of the car, it's going to get broken into. So I walk back to the parking lot and I tell the guy, excuse me. I tell the guy, hey man, sorry, but I left my camera on the front seat. I don't want it to be stolen. And he just looked at me, this little old Italian guy in Little Italy. He looked at me like I was crazy. He's like, it's not going to be stolen. Not out of this lot. It's not going to be stolen. And of course it wasn't. I left it there and it wasn't. That's a high trust society. If I had parked that car in Harlem, you think the camera would still be there when I got back from the restaurant? Of course not. That's a low trust society. There was another example of high trust that I've forgotten about. But yeah, we've destroyed our high trust society by importing the third world, which doesn't bring high trust values with us. Much of the third world just feels, and let's face it, many urban communities in America, if you leave a bike unlocked, that's on you. You are begging for your bike to be stolen, right? Low trust community. I had that experience once as a kid. So I grew up in a fairly nice suburban neighborhood. We would leave our bikes and our skateboards and our basketball. We'd leave all that stuff in the yard. We'd play for a while. We'd get bored. We'd move on to something else. Our yard is covered. And then at the end of the day, Dad would come home and say, hey, pick up all your trash, right? And we would police up the area and put everything away. But it never occurred to us for a second that if we left our bike or skateboard or basketball out in the front yard, it would disappear. And then we went to visit some friends of my folks who lived in New York City. And I left my skateboard out on their front yard for like 3 minutes, and it was gone like that. And they were very apologetic, the people who own the home, but I could also see them looking at me like, what are you, retarded? You can't leave stuff in of course it's going to get stolen. Because in their community, that was normal. Their low trust community. In my high trust community, it was not. I'd like America to be a high trust environment again. That would be awesome. Did I answer that? Yeah. Well, if we want that, we have to build it. It's not natural. And of course, we've degraded it by importing 100 million illegal migrant third world invaders. And frankly, many legal migrants too. So the hundreds of thousands of H-1Bs we bring in from India, that's a low trust society, folks. We're importing low trust people. P. Barante, $5 says, please do a show explaining the Department of Justice going after Beachcomber Comey. Brennan, the treasonous bastard, sounds almost like a RICO thing. I'll probably cover it at some point. It's funny because when Comey was made director of the FBI, Mueller had been the director before. Mueller, and by the way, the director of the FBI is almost never someone who's been an FBI agent. Almost never. Mueller had not been an FBI agent. He was a lawyer, of course. And the director of the FBI is only supposed to serve a limited time. It's almost like only 2 terms for a president, because if they stay in office too long, there's this risk of corruption, right? We had this concern with Hoover, who was there for decades. But somehow Mueller kept getting extensions. So he was there for a term and then another term and then another term. And of course, a lot of weird stuff was happening with the FBI, right? Waco was happening. Ruby Ridge was happening. And I had friends working at the FBI who'd been there for 10 or 15 years, and they were describing to me an FBI that was profoundly changing, from being a very constitutional, pro-America, hiring lots of veterans, hiring lots of cops, to becoming an agency under Clinton and of course under Obama, where they were hiring lots of progressive fascists, lots of left-wingers, lots of people out of university, lots of people without a military or law enforcement background, more initially accountants and lawyers, and then more kind of just academic types, gender studies degrees, danger hair people. And it fundamentally changed the culture of the FBI. So the FBI today is not the FBI of 30 years ago. It's a profoundly different institution. Same with the Department of Justice, by the way. The same corruption happened in the Department of Justice. But my personal experience is more with the FBI because I had friends serving there at the time. And when Comey was brought in as director of the FBI, the guys I considered the old school FBI agents, the guys who were former veterans, former street cops, the guys who'd been there 10 or 15 years, not the new freaks, the guys I would trust to have my back with a gun. They were like, oh, thank God, Comey's coming in. Comey's going to save the FBI, because Comey had a reputation of being that kind of dude, being a dude who just called shots straight, call strikes and balls, didn't matter where the chips fell, a law and order kind of guy. They were super excited about Comey coming in. They thought Comey was going to basically save the Bureau. And nobody was more crushed than them, the old school special agents, when Comey turned out to be who we now know him to be. Terrible. It's a truism in life that, the key to having quality employees or quality staff, it's not really in the hiring. When you hire someone, you never really know for sure what you're going to get, I guess, unless you've hired them before in other roles. But if you're hiring someone you don't have personal knowledge of, you don't really know what you're getting. There's always uncertainty there. So the key to having high quality employees or staff is not so much in the hiring, it's in the firing. Once you see that's gone sideways, you got to get them off the bus. That's what saves the quality of your personnel. There's always risk in hiring. The key is keeping an eye on them and seeing if it's going sideways and getting rid of them quickly when it does. All right, just about wrapping up, folks. Ashley Weaver, $10, says, I found your channel by accident, but glad I did. Love your show. Have learned so much. I normally watch your show at night. I work graveyard shift at the hospital, sleep during the day. 100% agree with you. That's very kind, Ashley. Ashley, that's a very interesting spelling for Ashley. Of course, Weaver has a long and distinguished history and tradition in the firearms community in many ways. I'm sure you're not related, Ashley, or at least I assume you're not. There's the Weaver stance from Jack Weaver, right? The pistol stance with the weak arm elbow straight down, isometric tension. That's how I was told how to present the 1911 pistol by Jeff Cooper. Back in the day, yes, I was personally taught by Jeff Cooper how to run a 1911. And of course, he was teaching the Weaver stance, as he always did. Weaver mounts on firearms for mounting scopes and sights, for example. But thank you for the kind words, Ashley. I really appreciate that. And I think that's about it, folks. We're at 2 hours. Let me take a quick look and see if there's member comments. Normally, I only address super chats $5 or more, but we do have a bunch of Law of Self-Defense members, and I do see a little icon. Oh my God. Talk about a low trust society. Someone even dumped a dead horse on my farm. Are you kidding? Although I have to confess, if I had a dead horse, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I'm pretty sure my waste management's not going to take a dead horse in a plastic bin out of my front curb. But that's terrible. A dead horse. Were there teeth marks in it? Was it like the Haitians in Georgia cooking the cats and dogs, grilling the cats and dogs? Yeah. Troy Nix, diesel mechanic. You're a man of many talents. Yes, well, it was a family business. Family business. My grandfather and two of my great uncles, two of his brothers, started what was called Branca Brothers, as a tire repair business. They didn't even have a shop. They would repair flat tires. This is in the 1920s, folks. They would repair flat tires just on the street corner. A Model T would roll along and have a flat, and they had a bucket with their tools in it and plugs and patches. And they would just, of course, those were tubed tires back then. They would patch up the tube and put everything back together and send him on his way. And that grew into being a full-blown repair business for trucks in Harlem, New York. And then they got into sales as well. They sold Kenworth trucks, the big tractor trailer trucks, for many years. Then they sold Mitsubishi trucks for many years. And they had a shop out on Long Island too. But I would work at both those shops since I was 11 or 12 years old. That's how I spent my summers. And my first jobs were things like, sorting nuts and bolts, loose nuts and bolts into the right bins. And then being gifted some well-used tools by my great uncles, 40 years older than me, and working under their tutelage to learn how to be an actual diesel mechanic. And I was blessed to have that opportunity. By the way, today, those opportunities don't exist because all those kind of makeshift jobs, you're not really worth anything, but we're going to teach you how to be worth something. All those jobs today are seized by 100 million illegal migrant third world invaders. So our young men don't have the opportunity to learn those skills. That kind of hands-on under the tutelage of master craftsmen, essentially informal apprenticeships, is how I learned how to be a diesel mechanic, is how I learned how to do electrical work in a house, plumbing work in a house, replace windows, frame windows in a house, do exterior siding on a house, put decks in a house, all that stuff. How to do landscaping. I worked as a landscaper on a golf course in Florida as a kid. Now, I don't do that work anymore. Now I'm a lawyer and I guess a political commentator. But as a young man, I built all those skills, and having that foundational skill set, even folks, it guides you for all your life. The cliche is your dad says, just do it. It builds character. It does build character. It builds self-respect and pride. You've done something that was hard. You've learned a skill set that's valuable, that improves lives, even if it's just unplugging a drain, wiring a light switch. It doesn't have to be as complicated as being a diesel mechanic. And I got pretty good at it. I was rebuilding cat engines, the whole thing, transmissions, clutches. But the skill levels don't have to be high. But nothing makes me sadder than to see a grown-ass man who, for the life of him, wouldn't know which end of a screwdriver to hold or how to work a hammer. And for those of you who think there's no talent to working a hammer, you've never done framing. You've never done roofing. My great uncle was a master carpenter. That guy, he must have weighed about 120 pounds wet. And he would drive a roofing nail, a giant roofing nail, with 2, maybe 3 swings of that hammer. A tap to set it, and bam! That guy with his little skinny arms could swing that hammer with so much momentum and so accurately. It was like a hydraulic machine had driven that nail in. And there was me. Tap, 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 tap. There's skill in almost everything, folks, including wielding a hammer. Including wielding a hammer. Boy, more super chats. You guys don't want me to go, which is fine. I love being here. Bid Moon, $5. For states that have sensitive area restrictions, do you suggest any less lethal options? You're an icon. Oh, thank you very much. I don't really do weapons law because it varies too much from state to state. I can tell you what I do personally. I carry a gun every day. I have my entire adult life, where, of course, I'm legally allowed to carry a gun. I recently spent a week in New York and New Jersey visiting family over July 4th. I can't legally carry a gun in New York or New Jersey. So, of course, I didn't bring one. Ultimately, you are the weapon, right? The weapon's not the gun. The weapon's just a tool. You're the weapon. And there are tools other than weapons you can carry. I don't know if, I routinely carry, if I carry a gun, I'm carrying pepper spray. That's kind of my backup, less than lethal defensive option. It's a projectile weapon. I can maintain distance. It's not magic. It doesn't work on everybody, but it's a solid option to have, in my opinion. If I couldn't carry a gun in New York, but I could carry pepper spray, I would carry pepper spray, assuming, of course, that was lawful. I always carry a folding knife just because I'm a man. I mean, I've been carrying a folding knife on my person since I was a teenager. Now, of course, they're very handy. They have a little pocket clip on them. I used to, in high school, I carried a buck knife to high school. And my teachers knew, the school knew. It was no secret. I had a buck knife in my pocket. I carried it so habitually, it would create an outline in the denim of my jeans. I mean, there was an outline of a buck knife. I would open packages for my teacher. No one thought anything of it. Of course, in that same high school, I was on the rifle team. And the rifle range was in the basement of the high school under the cafeteria. We'd go down there and shoot our 22 rifles. So a knife is always handy to have if you can lawfully do that. Sometimes they sell these. Someone sent me this one. It's an aluminum pen, very robust pen. So you could use it as a striking implement, I guess. I don't know. I have to confess, I don't normally carry this. It's just on my desk, but that's another option. Your hands. I mean, I would recommend everyone learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Then your hands become your whole body. The gravity of the planet Earth becomes your defensive weapon. Again, like pepper spray, like a gun. It's not suitable for every possible scenario, but it's a nice skill set to have. But ultimately, your weapon is this. Ultimately, your weapon is this. You know what's a weird thing I've noticed lately is you go to the airport, right? And you go through security and they don't want you, like you can't bring a knife through security, right? Even if you tried to bring like a butter knife through security, they would take it away from you. But if you have a pass, like I pay for an annual pass to the United Lounge here in Denver because it's a United hub and it comes in handy. When I go to the United Lounge and I eat, they give me, this is after security, they give me a metal knife and a metal fork and a metal spoon. When I fly business class, they give me metal implements on the plane. But you can't carry it through security. There are things almost everywhere, folks, that can be a weapon, including, of course, your hands, your arms, your legs, your clothing, shoelaces, and things that are permitted through security. You just have to be a little creative. But you know, having the tool is not what makes you dangerous. Having a gun does not make you dangerous. It's you. It's like from Breaking Bad, right? I am the danger. Heisenberg. Walt, I am the danger. That's the correct mindset. David Weedo says, thanks for leaving the R out of my last name. It's assumed anyway. My great-grandfather shortened the name from the original Weedoff. Yeah, the same happened to me. I don't think we chose it. My family name is Branca, Branca. It was Brancaccio. When we immigrated from Italy to Ellis Island, it was Brancaccio. And they wrote down the first 6 letters, immigration did, and that was it. We got the first 6 letters. I actually have some older relatives, great uncles, who legally changed their name back to Brancaccio in later life. Let's see. Alaska sauce. My mother always told me. Alaskan sauce, $5. Has invited me up to Juneau to do some fishing. I might just do that. That would be a great experience. I've actually never been to Alaska. I've ridden my motorcycle in every state of the U.S. except for Alaska and Hawaii. It's kind of hard to ride to Hawaii. He writes, my mother always told me education is something no one can ever take away from you. Well, yes, properly understood, right? Useful, practical information. And by practical, I don't necessarily mean like how to cook or how to use a hammer. Philosophy is a practical education. How to solve problems is a practical education. How to apply reason and logic is a practical education. Things that facilitate your... Am I back? I touched my microphone cable and the microphone went out. Sorry about that. But any knowledge, experience, skills that help you be productive in life is education. A lot of what we call education today is just indoctrination. If anything, it has negative value in terms of helping someone be productive in life. But yes, genuine education. And of course, much of it is self-education, right? In fact, today, probably the only way to get a real education is probably self-education. I don't think it's readily available through our educational institutions anymore. They're largely indoctrination institutions. We still see people go get tons of degrees, right? Oh, I've got a bachelor's and a master's and a PhD. I've got 2 masters, 3 masters, whatever. And you talk to them for 2 minutes and they're clearly not educated people. My grandfather, who left school in the 6th grade, but read voraciously his whole life, was far better educated than a Supreme Court Justice Ketanji. I'm not a biologist. How would I know what a woman is? Jackson, who graduated magna cum laude from Harvard. My grandfather with the 6th grade education is more educated than a Supreme Court justice. who's very well credentialed, but is not educated. So we have to be careful. Credentialing, not equal education. Two very different things. Sue B became a YouTube member. That's awesome, man. I love our members. That kind of ongoing support is, it's very modest to be a YouTube member. It's only about $5, I think, the lowest level of membership. By the way, we are going to start doing a call-in show. We're working on setting up the phone line and all that. I think every Friday, I think I'm going to do a Rush Limbaugh style open mic Friday. But the call-in number will only be shared with higher level members. So we have multiple levels of membership. I haven't quite decided exactly how to do that. I think the whole show, we're not sure, but we do need to limit who can call in, because I don't want someone calling in and like shouting the N-word a bunch of times for obvious reasons. But we'll keep you informed of all that. That might be another reason some of you would like to become members. Ashley says that's not the weirdest spelling of Ashley. It's pretty weird spelling of weird. Weirdest spelling of Ashley. There are 2 other Ashleys in my class. We all spelled it differently. How funny. The 3 Ashleys. Ash threes. Well, thank you for being here, Ashley, and thank you for your generous support. I really appreciate it. All right. Now I think is a good time to cut everybody loose. Yeah? All right. So it is Friday. I'm not sure what my weekend holds for me. We try to do regularly. Oh, I am traveling next week. So the schedule will be a little upset next week. For those of you who may know, the YouTube channel, Fresh and Fit, they have like 1.5 million subscribers, very large channel. They mostly cover stuff like relationship topics, alpha male type topics. So, it's not for everybody, but they've invited me on their show to be a guest next week, next Wednesday, as a law self-defense expert. And this is a good time for me, actually, so I don't forget to remind everybody once again, let's see, of our upcoming webinar. So this is the Andrew Branca Show. We do political and legal commentary. But my law practice is teaching people how to be hard to convict if they're ever compelled to use force in defense of themselves, their family, or their property. And one of the ways we do that is a free webinar. We do several times a year. We have one coming up on Saturday, August 16th. So a little bit less than a month. It's totally free. We spend about an hour teaching you how to be hard to convict. If you ever have to act in self-defense, it's totally free, but you do have to register because it is an online webinar. It is live, taught live by me, but there's a limited number of webinar seats. So if you'd like to participate in that, you need to register at lawofselfdefense.com/hard-to-convict. Again, doesn't cost a penny. People learn a lot, and that's the way to do that. lawofselfdefense.com/hard-to-convict. And I'll kill the banner there. I'll thank all of you for spending another 2.5 hours of your precious time with me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. If you haven't yet subscribed to this channel on YouTube, please do that. That's a big help to us. Hit that thumbs up, like button as well. And until next time.